Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Baldrige Foundation's Institute for Performance Excellence webinar, Building Resilient and High Reliability Organizations, Strategies for Success Across Industries. As a reminder, due to the high number of participants, everyone will be kept on mute during the presentations. If you have questions, please submit them to the moderator in the Q&A box located on your control screen. Presenters will answer questions during our panel discussions. Before we get started today, I want to take a moment and recognize members of the Mac Baldrige Society who serve as trustees of the Foundation's Institute for Performance Excellence. It is their generous support that makes presentations like today's possible. So here's today's agenda. Our guest presenter is Tammy Dye, Chief Strategy Officer for Jordan Johnson Incorporated. Following her presentation, we'll have questions from the audience and a few closing remarks. So now, Tammy, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Al. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're going to explore a framework that's starting to really gain attention across a whole lot of industries, and that's high reliability organizations, or HROs. And these organizations are operating in environments where a lot of times errors can have very serious consequences. Yet, for some reason, they're able to minimize failures and really maintain high performance. We're also going to talk a little bit about resilience. And I know that's kind of become a buzzword recently with all the disruptions everyone has had in the past few years. And resilience is just really the ability to adapt and recover and maintain operations even when the unexpected, or especially when the unexpected happens out there. So, whether you work in manufacturing or logistics or healthcare or technology, resilience really is the key to surviving and actually thriving in a volatile environment. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about how these HRO principles tie into the Baldrige criteria for performance excellence. Many organizations are using that criteria to drive and sustain success. Baldrige puts a huge emphasis on operational excellence, innovation, and resilience. And you're going to see all of those central themes in today's presentation. So when you think about across industries, you think about why principles and resilience matter. They were originally kind of designed or put into place in principle in organizations like nuclear power and aviation and healthcare, sectors where failure really is incredibly costly, but it's more importantly, it's absolutely catastrophic. But today, what we've discovered is that businesses across all sectors can benefit from those same core principles. You think about it, industries are facing very complex situations, very uncertain conditions. Doesn't matter if you're in manufacturing or technology or logistics. All of these fields, reliability and resilience really are critical to success. And if you can't ensure that you're consistently operating and adapting to change, you're going to lose your customers. Of course, you're going to lose revenue, and you're going to lose your credibility and potentially cause harm. The Baldrige framework, some of you may be a little familiar with out there, it really elevates or evaluates organizations on some of those key elements like leadership and strategy and operational efficiency. And we're going to look at some HRO principles that can help position your organization to not only meet the standards that's out there for the Baldrige criteria, but exceed them. So before we get started, we're going to do a little poll, a pre-webinar poll, and we'll just look and see. Pull up the poll. Relaunch poll. Okay. You should see a poll that pops up on your screen, and you should be able to simply walk through and answer those questions, and we'll see where we're at. The first one is, How often does your organization proactively identify failures or risk before they actually escalate? Once we get through all those, I'll be able to share the results with you. This will kind of give us a little bit of sense of um, the maturity level, the work that's going on in the organization. Those answers are coming through. The second question, to assess lessons learned, identify best practice in use, and understand participants ready to implement. How often do you look at those root causes? Third question, how empowered are frontline employees in your organization that's really allowing them to make decision based on their level of expertise? And finally, how well does your organization maintain operational awareness and adjust in real time to just small changes or small issues? Just give that a few more seconds. There's still a few more answers popping up. Almost everyone has responded, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share results. So as you can see, you've got we've got some opportunity of sometimes is definitely 50% of the time. We said sometimes organizations proactively identify failures or risk before they escalate. So the majority of you said sometimes or often. Got a few of you out there that's always. Um, Understanding the root causes, truly going down to the root causes. It's a little more balanced. Sometimes we address the root causes or often. How empowered are frontline employees to make decisions. So we've got some that are fully powered, mostly empowered, moderately empowered out there. And then how well do you maintain operational awareness and adjust in good time? The Over 50% of you said there's a good level of awareness or a high level of awareness. So that kind of gives us a baseline of where we're at on HRO and where these principles can help you the best. So when you think about it, those high reliability organizations and the high risk environment that they're in, making sure that you can adapt and recover from all of those challenges, and then linking it to the Baldrige framework is the high level overview of what we're going to focus on this morning. So when you think about it, operational reliability and minimizing risk in very complex industries are critical. I talked a little bit about aviation and nuclear power and healthcare. That's where they've been at in the majority of the history. But all organizations, regardless of what sector they're in, can benefit from putting together these 5 principles. And that's what we talked about. What are the core principles of HROs? The very first principle that we're going to talk about is preoccupation with failure. So what is the preoccupation with failure? So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. It means as an organization, you're always on the lookout for just those small little signs of failure or tweaks or weak points in your operations. Organizations that we saw, about 40% of you, they really don't follow that principle. And if you don't, you find yourself solving major problems when they occur instead of treating little small errors or near misses as opportunities to learn and improve. So we're really good about something breaks and we go back and we fix it. Instead, HROs are really looking at those near misses, those small little items, and they don't allow them to escalate to large issues. So how do you really do that? How can you make that happen? Um, Start in your organization by making sure you're encouraging open reporting. Most organizations that we work with have that formal process, incident reporting system, those big issues, they capture those really well. But how good are we at capturing just those small errors? And how good are you capturing at the almost or those close calls? If you need to, start by anonymously just gathering insights, really looking on things that went wrong and act upon them. Some ways to change that culture. So much of this is culture, is just conduct regular lessons learned. At the end of your project that you've got going on, or at the end of your shift, you just bring all of your teams together. You discuss what nearly failed and how can you prevent it for the future. And it, even though you may not have a lot of items that are happening, you've started developing that culture and the mindset where you're always looking for something that could go wrong and how to fix it before it does. That proactive approach. So principle 2 is the reluctance to simplify. So what does that mean when you're thinking reluctance to simplify? In business, we like to boil down problems, or it's tempting to boil down some of those problems into simple explanations. But when you're in a complex system or a complex environment, rarely is there simple causes or simple solutions. And if you oversimplify, you risk overlooking or missing some key factors that really could lead to more serious issues down the line. Now, don't get me wrong, HROs absolutely value standardization of workflows, reducing variation. Um, and HROs also realize that there's complexity, and that complexity is just inherent when you've got different people or different teams or your processes in place, relationships. All of those are involved in daily operations, and they're a factor when you're looking at how you operate. And it's very risky to oversimplify the explanation of what's happened or even what might happen. If you can, as an organization, if you can identify those little subtle differences around safety or risk, it can make a huge difference between whether you have early recognition or late recognition. Think about it like simple processes are very good, but simplistic explanations for why things are working or why things aren't working are a little risky. So HROs think about, our system, they realize they can fail in the future in ways that have never happened before. And they also realize they will never identify all the different ways their systems could fail in the future. And to avoid this, they dig a little deeper into problems. And you can use some standard improvement tools out there, enhancing your work processes, outcomes. A root cause analysis is a great tool to look at, and don't stop at the first answer you get. It's those simple 5 whys, or underlying the root cause of the problem. For example, if something is delayed, you simply ask, why was it delayed? And you fix that process. We never go deeper to say, well, why did the supplier not deliver it on time? Why did we not have any backups? So many times when we get the first break in the process, we band-aid that or we fix it, and we don't keep asking the questions to get to the root cause. The problem just goes up or down the line. Another way you can think about that is start putting some multidisciplinary teams together. You get people in the room from different departments, you're going to get a whole lot of different perspectives on the issues that are going out. And it's really going to help you see that bigger picture. And by getting everyone in the room, it's going to prevent those quick fixes and you really start to tease out solutions that are going to look at the root causes of the problems that are going on. Principle 3 is about sensitivity to operations. And that's about staying attuned on what's happening on the ground, what's happening on the front line. It's being very aware of those day-to-day realities, those things that are happening every day in your operations, rather than focusing just on that high-level strategy. Organizations that are HROs put together things like Gemba walks. And that's where, if you're a manager or a leader, you're out there pretty regularly visiting the front line of your business. Um, doesn't matter if it's a production floor or if it's a service department, or it can be a retail outlet. But you're out there observing firsthand. And when leaders are present and they start getting engaged, you're going to be able to spot inefficiencies or potential problems before they escalate, when staff in the front line have normalized the variation. That's just how we do it. The workarounds are just what we put into place. And use dashboards, use operational metrics. We're pretty good about looking at outcome metrics, but what about the day-to-day operational metrics? If you've got a really good, robust measuring and monitoring system or dashboard, that's going to allow your frontline managers to make decisions and changes on what's actually going on, not what they think is happening. Another tool that's absolutely phenomenal to use is daily huddles. And that's where you can share insights to what's happening, you flag issues, you get everyone on the same page. And once again, you're sending the message, that cultural change, that we're looking for potential areas of improvement. We're looking for potential things that could go wrong, and we're looking to fix them before, and it's okay to talk about those. Principle 4 is deference to expertise. And what that really means is decisions should be made by the people that have the most relevant knowledge. That doesn't mean it's the one with the most authority. Um, in a whole lot of organizations, we see that hierarchical structure, it just slows down your decision making. And if frontline employees have to get approval from management before they can act, your potential for addressing or solving or preventing problems greatly goes down. Now, that doesn't mean you don't put in place decision-making protocols. To put this in place and empower your frontline staff, you have to have those decision protocols in place. And the employees are empowered and they know what that empowerment is. So they feel very secure that they've got authority to act when they see a problem. They don't have to wait for someone higher up to tell them what to do. In addition to that, you do need to make sure that your employees have escalation paths. There are going to be times when there's decisions out there that are going to require a specific person or specific expertise, and they're not going to be able to safely make that answer. And we need to make sure they know who the right person is to go to quickly so that they can then act quickly. And when you think about leadership development, um, you have to teach your leaders first to know how to build trust in their employees' knowledge. So you've got to train your managers on how do you rely on your team? How do you make sure that you're looking to the insights of them? And if you've got a fast-paced environment out there or a high-stakes environment, this becomes critical. You have to work to build principles about breaking down silos and ensuring the people that are closest to the issue are the ones that have the autonomy and the authority to address that issue. Our final principle that we're putting in place is commitment to resilience. And resilience is all about ensuring when things go wrong, and It's not if, it's when they will go wrong. Your organization really can bounce back pretty quickly and continue to function. Um, so that ability to adapt and recover is absolutely critical in a world where disruptions come from absolutely anywhere and everywhere. You can have supply chain issues or cybersecurity threats, economic shifts, workforce concerns. All of those are impacting organizations across the country. And think of resilience as your outcome. Resilience isn't the place you start your improvement efforts, it's the outcome when you get there. And how you build resilience is even just have some crisis management plans. So you think ahead of time, what are we going to do? How are we going to recover when something happens? It could be anything from a natural disaster to an IT outage, or a strike that happens in your organization. Ensure that your teams are prepared and know what to do in any scenario. So you put the process in place, but then you have to conduct resilience stress test. You got to test your system. You got to stress it out. So simulate crisis. See how well your systems hold up when you put some pressure on them. Can your team really respond effectively if all your primary systems go offline? Do you have those redundancies built into those critical operations? So if even one element fails, you can continue to function. And another tool you can use is train your employees in those rapid response techniques. Use drills when a crisis does hit. Your teams need to be prepared and exactly what to do when they're looking at it. Now, that doesn't mean that when you think about high reliability organizations and you think about commitment to resilience, you always hold people accountable for their actions, but you don't hold them necessarily accountable for flaws in the processes or the systems. When things go wrong, you make sure people are treated fairly and justly, and committing to resiliency, you make sure you are always taking those human factors into account. And we have to build our systems and structures to make it hard for people to do the wrong thing and very easy for people to do the right thing. So what does that look like? Operational resilience, kind of in action. The first thing when you think about it is, how do you then build resilience across all industries? Resilience is not just for those large corporations or businesses that are in high risk industries. Every organization, doesn't matter your size, it doesn't matter your sector. You're really going to have to build resilience to survive and thrive in today's world. The slowest amount of change is today. It's just going to continue to put more pressure on organizations, and resiliency is the one item that's going to move an organization to success in the future, no matter what comes your way. So start planning or preparing your organization through things like scenario planning. You get your team together and you start talking about what are some potential disruptions. It could be anything from your competitor is launching a new product. How is that going to disrupt who we are and what we provide? Or there's a shift in market demand, a shift up or a shift down. How is that going to change? And you have to put those strategies in place to address them. Another critical step in creating a culture of innovation and a culture of adaptability. You got to encourage your teams to experiment. They need to learn from the failures and, if necessary, pivot to make things successful in the future. So promoting flexibility and openness to change, that's also going to help empower your teams to adapt quickly and in a crisis. So how do you make that happen? You make your systems and processes more reliable, to standardize and simplify. You design those processes so people do the same thing the same way every time. When you're standardized, it makes it much easier to train on the process. And if the process starts to fail, again, I said earlier, not the human side, but when processes start to fail and where they fail, the organization can better target those, they improve, and they rapidly put changes in place to get back on track. And to kind of put it simply, the more complex something is, the less likely it is to be successful. So, staff may avoid following processes. If your processes are too difficult or too time consuming, that's when you're going to just open up the door for mistakes. The more complex something is, the simpler the processes need to be to get it done. So, I said it before, simple processes make it easy for people to do the right thing. If it's complex and they're doing lots of workarounds, that's when you're opening the door for errors or mistakes to happen. So, what happens? How do you then adapt during a crisis? What are some of those, lessons learned out there? Um, when that happens, organizations that get through the process or fare best are those that can adapt quickly. But adaptability, isn't something that's going to be successful overnight. Have to build that bench strength in your organization. It's built over time, and you do that through foresight, preparing, planning, and culture. So if you want to enhance your ability to adapt, there's things you can do to simplify, like focusing on digital transformation. Invest in tools or systems that can allow you to pivot your operations quickly. So whether it's something like moving to e-commerce or enabling remote work of your team or adjusting the supply chain quickly, your ability to adapt is going to be critical for you to move forward. Another strategy, which has been very successful, and we saw that especially through COVID, is cross-training employees. That's another key strategy. So you make sure that your workers are skilled across functions, and that allows you to shift your human resources when they're truly most needed in a crisis, and making sure that your critical operations continue to function and continue to move forward. So what is resilience and Baldrige criteria? How does that all fall together? The Baldrige criteria emphasizes operational resilience as one of the key components of long-term success. If you're aligning your business practices with the criteria, you're going to strengthen your organization and its ability to adapt to disruptions, no matter what that disruption is, and you're going to position yourself to be a leader in your industry. No matter what we saw that through COVID. We saw those organizations or those industries that came through and led the way or led the process so that we could continue to deliver their products and services. And those organizations, they had a core foundation of adopting continuous improvement practices, whether it's PDSA, Lean, or Six Sigma. Those types of methodologies focusing on identifying inefficiencies in your system and improving your processes over time. And that really enables or ensures your organization's going to remain adaptable and resilient. Um, and, and don't forget, at the end of the day, you have to maintain your customer engagement when things are disruptions. Keeping communication open, leveraging your digital tools, ensuring that your customers are still receiving the service and the products that they expect, especially when times are challenging. So, what are some steps to becoming a high reliability organization? Like absolutely everything, it has to start with leadership. Leaders really have to model the behaviors and the attitudes that they want to see throughout the organization. And to do that, you're going to have to make safety, resilience, and operational excellence are just simply non negotiable priorities in your organization. So that's creating that zero harm policy or zero defect policy where safety and reliability are paramount. Um, you can form some cross functional safety and reliability committees that really oversee your effort, and they work to ensure that those values are embedded in everything you do. So you got to have that clear vision for high reliability, ensuring that everyone really understands what high reliability means and why does it matter? Why is it important? It's obviously important for like the aviation industry. Why is it important for other industries? Why is it important for manufacturing um, or making sure the supply chain is there? You have to help them understand the value in becoming a high reliable organization. And value stream mapping is a very powerful tool to help you identify where are those inefficiencies in our processes. So you're mapping out the flow of materials. You're also mapping out the flow of information, communication, handoffs. You're going to spot very quickly those bottlenecks that are happening. You're going to stop the redundancies and you're going to see the reworks and you're going to see all the waste that happens in your processes. And start by just scheduling regular value stream mapping workshops with your team. So once you've got those areas identified and to improve, you put the action plans in place and you address those issues. And again, that's where Gemba Walk are going to be critical tools for leaders to use. So if the leaders are out there going to the front line and they're observing firsthand, those real-time insights are how things are working and where improvement is needed is going to be absolutely critical in becoming an HRO. So Kaizen events are also continuous improvement events. And that's where we really found organizations transition a lot of their improvement of work to Kaizen events. And that's just focused short-term projects where the team gets in a room, gets the problem solved, goes out and addresses the action items to fix the operational issues. And you've got the cross-functional teams together, you're brainstorming solutions, you're implementing them quickly. Kaizen events or can be anywhere from 2 hours to a week, 5 days. But you're putting the right people in the room all at once to identify the problem, solve the problem, and go fix the problem. When we've done more of the traditional 90-day improvements, everyone's schedules are so complex and there's so many remote or virtual workers that are happening. We found a lot of organizations have been more successful to do a small condensed improvement event than a big long 3-month improvement event. Now we're going to do a post-webinar pool and see what we've learned. So the first question, we've learned about the 5 principles. How confident are you, whether it's preoccupation with failure, reluctance to simplify? Um, how confident do you feel about going back and saying we need to implement some of these principles? Okay, answers are starting to come in. The second question, rate the following HRO practices in your organization today. How are you proactively identifying risks? You're preoccupied with failure. You're turning those rocks over and intentionally looking for places to fix. How good are you at analyzing root causes, not simplifying or fixing the first thing that you find along the continuum and band-aiding it? That deference to expertise, empowering the experts. Let those closest to the work that know the work best be the ones that are solving the problems. And then maintain real-time awareness, those sensitivity to operations. We are out there doing Gemba walks. We know what's happening in our front line. We've empowered people to take the necessary steps to make sure things are functioning well. The third question, um, your organization. Now that you've looked at this a little bit more, how prepared do you feel your organization is to adapt very quickly to these disruptions and crises? Do you have those five factors in place, and are you going to be resilient? And then thinking about it, how likely are you going to be to take back and implement or refine some of those best practices that we talked about today, to enhance resilience in your organization, go through a cycle of improvement, and really start building that high reliability culture throughout your whole entire organization? We've got a little bit of delay with across the country, so I'll give it just about another minute, and then we will close this live. We'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results. We have a lot of you that are pretty confident to put these principles or implementing the principles in place. Rating those practices kind of are across the board. The biggest opportunity that we see is deference to those expertise, empowering those experts, those that are closest to the work, to be the ones to really solve the problems. A lot of you feel moderately prepared or mostly prepared to adapt quickly if the crisis comes out. And then taking some lessons learned about 80% of you are likely or moderately likely to take some of these back to your organization to really enhance or go through a cycle of improvement for the HRO for you and what you have in place. So what are some of those final takeaways and action steps? If you think about it, just remember building an HRO, that high reliable organization, isn't a one-time task. It isn't going to happen overnight. It takes consistent, ongoing commitment to really achieving excellence. But if you use those principles and you put them in place, you're going to help reduce risk of something going on. You're going to definitely improve the efficiency of your organizations when you look at the improvement processes you put in place. And you're going to have the foundation to ensure that your organization is going to be prepared to handle whatever challenges comes your way. It doesn't have to be necessarily a major disaster or a COVID or a flood. Um, it could be a competitor opening up down the street. It could be a supply chain issue that's going to impact you. It can be short term or it can be long term. If you're well prepared, the challenge really isn't going to matter. Your organization is going to be resilient to adjust to that challenge. So, what are those things you can do? Take back. Make sure you've got systems in place. Implement a system that report the near misses and addressing the small errors. Celebrate, reward people for finding those near misses and small errors, making it okay to be transparent and actually proactively looking for things that could go wrong. When things do happen, get to the root cause. Avoid making simple or oversimplifying solutions to things that are very complex. Complex processes, complex human interactions. You've got to make sure you're getting to the root cause. Build operational awareness through those Gemba walks, real-time dashboards. Empower your managers to use real-time data of operationally looking at things and how well they're doing, along with leaders going to the front line. Not only will that address culture, you're going to have a fresh set of eyes to really identify potential things and workarounds that staff have just gotten used to doing. And then the fourth thing to take back to your organization is train those teams on crisis management and start putting those contingency plans in place to make sure no matter what happens, your critical operations to provide your products and services continue. So that's the end of the HRO presentation. My goal was to give you some strategies to take back to really help you build a stronger, more resilient organization for the future.
Well, Tammy, thank you. That was an outstanding presentation. And by no surprise, there are a number of questions that have come in for you. So I'm just going to jump right in here to the first one. You've spoken about the importance of preoccupation with failure. Can you share an example of a company that successfully implemented this principle and how it transformed their operations?
Yeah, when you think about preoccupation with failure, although it's kind of an old example, it's one I think everyone can relate to. Think about Toyota. They're the best example that pops into my head about preoccupation with failure. Their total production system, their TPS that they put in place, and it was all around the idea of if we could identify as an organization just the smallest defects that we find in real time and immediately address them, and they call that method, I think, the Anden, and it allows any worker on the line, any worker at any production time to stop the whole plant, to stop the whole entire assembly if they find a problem. You've probably heard it as stop the line. And that really emphasizes catching issues very quickly, and really has significantly for them reduced their product defects. It improved their overall quality, and it was that ability alone, transformed Toyota into being a global leader in the manufacturing world. And that was all about ensuring small problems were fixed before they became costly, large scale issues. They're preoccupied with finding something early and fast.
Thank you. Our next question is, during the session, you emphasized the need for deference to expertise. What practical steps can leaders take to ensure that frontline employees feel empowered to make decisions?
Well, there's quite a few steps, several steps leaders can take to make sure that those frontline employees feel empowered. Um, of, of course, I've said you can't overemphasize culture. Um, you've got to make sure that employees or those frontline workers know that their value and their input is important and needed. Um, we'll go into organizations, and a lot of times we'll see that once a year survey that happens where there's some question out there on why my opinion matters. My leader listens to me. That's just a once a year snapshot, and it's really not enough. So you need to think about maybe actively seeking opinions. Use your meeting processes in place. Use your daily huddles. Recognize in frontline employees where their thoughts and their decisions and their questions have led to positive outcomes. So making sure employees know that you want their opinion and their opinion is valid. Asking the question once a year on the survey is not going to be enough to send that message. Another thing you can do is just flatten that hierarchy. Making sure that, employees have clear protocols that allow them to make very quick decisions with their expertise and their level of knowledge without waiting for approvals. Um, Really making sure that that process is in place, and training and continuous development are they're absolutely essential. Got to make sure employees have the right tools. You got to make sure that they have the right knowledge. You put those in place, and it's going to build their confidence that they can make the right decision right there on the spot when they're under pressure.
Okay, great. The next question is, one of your key takeaways was the importance of continuous improvement. How can organizations create a culture that encourages small, everyday improvements, even when there's pressure to focus on larger, more visible change?
Yeah. When you think of everyday improvements, it's really about um, making sure that there's the culture of accountability and openness. Um, Employees have to feel comfortable sharing their suggestions. A lot of great ideas for improvement come from the people that are closest to the problems. So you've got to have a platform in place, whether you've got a suggestion box or you do weekly meetings, or you've got digital platforms where people submit their ideas. And these can be the small tweaks that can improve efficiency or quality. Usually not those big, huge, visible innovation items, but those are the small wins that you want to make sure that you're publicly celebrating, highlighting even how minor adjustments can lead to some pretty big improvements over time. Um, Leaders also have to be out there leading by example. Leaders have to improve their own leadership processes, and they have to continuously improve their own roles. And that's sets that precedent for the rest of the organization for those small continuous cycles of improvement to get you to that excellent outcome you're looking for.
Okay. Next question. From your experience, what is the biggest barrier to preventing organizations from fully adopting HRO principles, and how can they overcome that challenge?
No, all of the research, the evidence is the human side of change, culture, call it whatever you want, in your organization, used to be thought of as the soft skills or the soft stuff. That's the hard stuff. Many organizations, especially if you're a traditional industry or you've got a team that's been in place for a long time, they can be set in their ways. And they've usually got some hierarchical structures that really discourage employees from the front line from even giving input. The other thing, when you think about leaders, a lot of times they're too focused on those short-term goals, those fighting fires, problems every day, to take a time out and invest in long-term improvements. Um, and to overcome that, we're comfortable in our firefighting mode. It's a shift in mindset from the top, and that means you're going to have to put some intentional process improvement work on their plates to be able to take things off of their plates. And that's a leadership mindset. And leaders have to make sure that they have bought into the idea that making sure that culture of safety, resilience, continuous improvement, it's going to be absolutely essential for long-term success. It's non-negotiable, but organizations kind of have to start small. So taking just one of those HRO practices in one department, or on one project, and really demonstrate the benefits that you're going to get before you start scaling up. Once you're a leader, or once you have teams, and they can start seeing those tangible improvements in the quality of the products that you're making, in the efficiency of your processes, you're going to lower risk. That's when they're going to be a little more likely to embrace that little harder, broader cultural shift to get all those HRO principles into every team across the board.
Perfect. Well, we've got one more question here, and it's from an anonymous attendee, but it's what is a compelling argument or argument to convince leadership to adopt and shift to an HRO mindset over time when it seems status quo is the current goal?
And that comes from when you think about organizations of excellence, organizations that are striving to deliver the best products possible. That frontline senior leadership team um, has to get the mindset that good is not good enough, or good is the enemy of great. Thinking through we our products and services that we deliver, are we okay being average? And if you can take any data, I mean, healthcare is a prime example. If we're just average, how many people in healthcare, what's our death rate versus if we're excellent? If you think about the aviation industry, what does excellent look like for the number of plane crashes versus average? Those are extremes. So depending on what your sector is and depending on what your products and services are, to build that consistent HRO, starting with those small products and services. I say a lot of times we will start with some financial wins. Um, when you think about products and services, if you can reduce variation, you can reduce redundant processes, you can take time off of people's plates, give them back to the core function of what they need to do. If you can reduce FTEs through efficiency, those are the wins that a lot of times executives need to know or see to find value in the outcome. Of course, quality is going to be there, but how can you look at safety and efficiency and effectiveness and make the organization hit, you're going to hit your quality bottom line, you're going to hit your financial bottom line, you're going to hit your workforce engagement bottom line, and you're going to hit your customer experience and expectations.
Well, thanks again, Tammy. That was just an outstanding presentation. I appreciate you taking the time to answer so many great questions from our audience. Go to the next slide here. I want to remind everybody that the Foundation's Institute for Performance Excellence has more than 400 training and professional development certification opportunities, all offered online and at your own pace. And this month we are showcasing 3 certification courses relating to today's presentation: the Baldrige Performance Excellence Champion Certification course, the 4-week Continuous Improvement Quick Start, and the 4-week Onboarding and Development Quick Start, for all focused around Baldrige. You can visit the Institute at baldrigeinstitute.org/education to learn more about these programs and to register. And as a reminder, the recorded version of today's presentation and slides will be available on the Foundation's website early next week. And once again, I want to thank all of our great sponsors and donors. We hope to see you all again next month when our webinar on November 20th will focus on an update of Communities of Excellence 2026, presented by Stephanie Norling, the President and CEO. Thanks again for attending today's afternoon, everyone, and have a great day.